is not a crime.
This is a stupid and ridiculous hearing.
It is an inefficient and stupid system.
That's just dumb.
They can pass whatever stupid legislation they want. It's really stupid to use military force for what is really a stupid interview.
I've heard plenty of black women say, if there's not a black woman on this ticket, I'm not voting.
They can't run two white guys.
Border Patrol saves about 4,000 lives every single year. Smuggling organizations profit off death and misery.
I still think it's better to not have any sort of even a partial shutdown.
I personally find it hard to understand how you get the requisite turnout among voters of color if it's a two white male ticket.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to a brand new week of, not welcome back, but welcome to a brand new week of broadcasting on American Family Radio and Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio and the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. So buckle up. We are getting ready to hit the highway, pedal to the metal. Want to remind you that my new book, the Boy to Man book, a training manual for fathers based on the book of Proverbs, is now available. You can get it at afastore.net. afastore.net. You can also call this number, 877-927-4917, and place an order by phone. Appreciate how many of it. We just had an amazing response on Friday, and I'm grateful to every one of you that ordered a book on Friday. You kept me here till 7 o'clock at night, by the way, signing books, which I'm happy and glad to do, and only had to do because of the overwhelming response we received from you, from this listening audience, and others who listen to AFR. So thank you very much for the early response. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to make it our goal to get a copy of this book into the hands of every father of a 12-year-old boy in the United States of America. So if you know a father of a 12-year-old boy, get this book into his hands. So let's make it our goal that every father of a 12-year-old boy in America, I have no idea how many boys and fathers that is, but it's a lot. And we want to get this book into the hands of every father who's got a 12-year-old son so he can spend time, sit down with his son, read this book with him, read this book through with him, pray over him at the end of every chapter. So that's afastore.net. It's the place to get it. The name of the book is The Boy to Man book, and you can get it at afastore.net.
Question, Brian. Would this be a book good for a grandfather as well? Would
Absolutely.
that work? Okay.
Absolutely. You know, if you, we had a call Friday from a single mom and wanting to know how would it be for her to go through with the book with her son. And I suggested this is a book that needs to be read to your son by an adult male that he looks up to. That's who needs to read this book to your boy. And so I suggested she's got a couple of brothers-in-law that are believers. The boy's involved in an active youth group, maybe the youth pastor, or he could find a volunteer in the ministry to take the time. It's 24 chapters. They're short chapters. Doesn't take an immense amount of time, but it does take dedication and focus and care for that boy to make sure that these truths are meaningfully absorbed into his life. So if you've got a absent father, but you've got a present grandfather, then buy this book for your grandfather, for the grandfather of your grandson, and or your son, and the son of your son. What am I trying to say here? Anyway, I got lost in all that. You know what I'm talking about. So you may be a mom's got a missing father, but your father's involved. The grandfather of the boy is involved, and perhaps urge him to read the book with your son and his grandson. So let's find a way to get this done. Let's get a copy of this book into the hands of every father of a 12-year-old son in the United States of America. That is your assignment, should you choose to accept it. And What's the thing? If you don't accept it, it'll blow up in 5 seconds or something like that. So I don't know what the deal is, but don't take a chance on that happening to you.
What was that? The old Mission Impossible?
Oh, Mission Impossible. This tape will self-destruct.
Yeah.
Well, this tape isn't going to self-destruct. Otherwise, it'd take me and Rob and Jeff right up along with it. So anyway, excited about the early start for the book. Very pleased at the response. And I want to be sure that you understand that any bit of credit or praise, I'm excited about this book, but not because of anything that it says about me. I'm serious about this. I think God gave me this book for some people. I don't know how many. I'll let God sort that out. But this, I believe, is something that God gave to me. The thoughts, the impulse, the idea came to me. I didn't dream it up out of my own self-conscious or subconscious. So I believe God gave this to me, and every bit of glory for any good thing that comes out of this thing belongs to God. And I prayed that Debbie and I prayed often together, virtually every night, that if he sees that there is some benefit to this book, that it has some benefit for the kingdom, that he would grant it his favor. Doesn't have any benefit to the kingdom, then I don't want this thing to go anywhere. If it does, then I will leave it up to God what he chooses to do with it. So anyway, thank you for your great response on Friday. Well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. I want to address a topic today that I know many people in our listening audience will be familiar with. And this is a deal where you're going through life, and it just seems like it's one knockdown after another and one obstacle after another. And as soon as you climb one hill, there's another one in front of you, and you're honestly doing your dead level best to obey God and to follow God. And all these tough things, difficult things keep happening to you. And meanwhile, you look across the street at your neighbors. They don't seem to be paying any attention to God, and they seem to be going fine. Their health is good. Their kids are doing great. He's getting raises at work. They've got a cabin on the lake for the weekends. They've got a boat, a ski boat, and all that. And it just seems to you like this is just unfair. It's not right that those that care nothing for God are the ones that are prospering, and that's what David is talking about. Or this is Asaph, actually. It's a psalm of Asaph in Psalm 73. And he says this, "As for me, my feet had almost stumbled," talking about in his spiritual walk and in life, "my steps had nearly slipped, for I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." So these people are arrogant. They're proud of what they've accomplished. They're proud of how much better they're doing than you are. And so that's what bothered Asaph. He's working hard to obey God, and it just didn't seem to be paying off for him. He sees some of them living until they die a peaceful death. They have no pangs until death. Everything seems to be working out for them. They set their mouths against the heavens, so they speak blasphemy against God. Nothing bad happens to them. Their tongue struts through the earth. They keep going around telling everybody how great they are, and nothing bad happens to them. Always at ease, they increase in riches, Asaph says. And this is what he says, "All in vain have I kept my heart clean and washed my hands in innocence." He says, I've been wasting my time. I've kept my heart clean. I've washed my hands to keep them pure, and it's all a waste. In vain have I done that. For all the day long I have been stricken and rebuked every morning. And then he caught himself because Asaph was a member of the leadership team. He was the member of the worship team at the temple. And he says, look, man, I got to slow down here. And I cannot speak this way before the congregation because it will dishearten them. So again, this is one of those reminders that if you are in a position of spiritual leadership, it is a mistake for you to publicly question the Word of God while you're doing it. Now, it's fine to look back on a period of your life where you struggled with your faith. That's fine, but not in the middle of it, because that would betray the generation of your children. So you don't want to do that. You want to work out those doubts. You want to work out those problems. You want to work out those questions yourself. And then when you have worked through them and you've come out to a good and steady and secure and stable place, then you can share with the congregation what you went through. And then Asaph says, look, I sought to try to understand this. It seemed to me a wearisome task to sort through all of this until I went in to the sanctuary of God. Then I discerned their end. Truly you set them in a slippery places. You make them fall to ruin, destroyed in a moment, swept away utterly by terrors. You know what this reminded me of is you see this building, this really tall building, and they have these trash chutes that go like from the 6th floor all the way down into the dumpster, and they just throw debris into there, and it just kind of slides lickety-split, down that tube and lands in the dumpster. And they're up on the 6th floor. They got a great view. Everything is looking good. And I think that's a picture of what David sees here, is these men that are strutting about the earth, that are experiencing no pain. Then death comes, and when they die, they slip into this trash chute, into this tube, and before you know it, they are gone. They have disappeared into a dumpster at the bottom of the building. And Asaph says, look, that is the end of those that do not know God and do not follow God. And so he says, that comforted my heart because I realize what my end is. I realize the road I'm on and where it leads. It leads to brighter days, brighter glory, and a splendid tomorrow. And those that do not follow God have a much, much different end. And then he says, in the meantime, Asaph says, I am continually with you. You hold my right hand. There's an interesting picture of Asaph reaching up his right hand and asking God to hold his hand. Who does that? Who reaches up their hand like that? Well, it's a kid, right? A child reaching up their hand to their dad to take a hold of their hand, pull them up out of a ditch, help them up an incline, help them up a step, guide him through a busy. So we're like children in the hands of God. And that's what we are to do as a childlike faith. Just hold our hand up to God and say, God, would you please grasp my hand and guide me and lead me through this life. Guide me with your counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. Then he says, who have I in heaven but you, and there is nothing on earth that I desire besides you. In other words, if I have you on earth, there's nothing else that I need. No matter what my mind may be telling me about how much I lack, how much is absent, if I have God in my life, then I have everything that I need. Well, let's take these concepts to prayer, if you'd be kind enough to join me. Lord God, we confess that there are times when we envy the arrogant, when we see the prosperity of the wicked. It seems as though they have no pain until death comes. Their bodies are healthy and strong, and they seem to be free from the burdens and troubles common to man. They scoff at you and set their mouths against the heavens, speak with malice of your followers. They are always carefree and increase in wealth. It can lead us to feel at times, Lord God, that it is vain and in vain that we have kept our hearts pure. We can grow weary trying to understand all this, and our souls can become embittered. But we know that if we speak in this way, we will betray those who look to us for guidance. And so I pray that we will all choose to enter your sanctuary and there come to understand the end and the final destiny of those who are far from you and are unfaithful to you. The day will come when you will place them on slippery ground and they will fall to ruin. They will perish and be suddenly destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. Remind us that each day you are available to us at every moment, and that we may continually be with you. I pray that we will reach out to you so that you may hold our right hand and guide us each moment with your counsel. Renew in us the hope that afterward, after this life is over, you will take us into glory. We know that there is no one we have in heaven but you. I pray that you will so work in us that there will be nothing on earth we desire more than you. Even though our flesh and our heart may fail, may you be the strength of our heart and our portion forever. I pray that we will all make you the sovereign Lord our refuge, and that you will grant us opportunity to tell others of all your works. In the name of Jesus, we pray these things. Amen.
Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. During the Bend to Justice Leadership Conference, Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii was asked why it was so difficult for Democrats to connect with voters. Senator Hirono responded that Democrats have so much information. They are really good at giving out all the information that touch people's minds, but not their hearts. She further explained, we Democrats know so much. We're very smart that we end up telling everyone how smart we are. And so we have a tendency to be very left-brained, indicating that the Democrat-to-voter disconnect is due to their intellectual superiority.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Land, President of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Rampant homosexuality, same-sex marriage, sex changes, transgender people on the cover of Time, epidemics of sexual abuse against children and sex trafficking, horrific levels of illegitimacy, all of these are symptoms of a cancer eating away at the soul of our society. And that cancer, at its core, is a selfish, moral philosophy that worships the humanistic, unholy trinity of I, myself, and me. America's problems are spiritual and moral, not political. A recent issue of the journal First Things has an insightful article by its editor, R.R. Reno, entitled The Empire of Desire, that traces the intellectual and spiritual roots of a pervasive and growing philosophy that declares all values relative and enshrines, quote, the supreme redemptive power of desire in all its primitive polymorphous perversity, end quote. Reno devastatingly concludes, quote, the greatest threat we presently face is not Islamic terrorism, global warming, nuclear proliferation, genocide, or poverty, pressing as these problems may be. The antinomian revolution in the postmodern West poses a more fundamental, existential threat to the human future because it erodes the cultural capacity necessary to respond to these challenges and to others, end quote. May God preserve us and allow the blind to see. May we reject the philosophical idolatry and spiritual cancer that is eating our souls and return to the Judeo-Christian faith of our fathers and to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. For more information about Southern Evangelical Seminary, go to ses.edu. God bless you, God bless your family, and God bless America. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. I am Brian Fisher, your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host.
As always.
Glad to be with you, glad to have you in the conversation. Don't forget, the book, The Boy to Man book, needs to be in the hands of every father of a 12-year-old in the United States of America. You can order one at afastore.net, afastore.net. You can also order one up by calling 877-927-4917. Now, I want to work through some of the stuff that's swirling around D.C. Let's start with this business about Donald Trump's payoffs to Stormy Daniels and to the other woman who is a Playboy playmate. Now, we have said this before. It's worth saying again. What Donald Trump did in these cases were sins, but they were not crimes. And when I'm saying they are sins, but they are not crimes, I'm not trying to let Donald Trump off the hook. I want you to understand that. I've got no use for this kind of behavior. I'm not going to excuse it. I'm not going to minimize it. It's perfectly wretched, immoral, reprehensible behavior, and Donald Trump engaged in this. Now, it was 12 years ago, but he's still engaged in it. That's the kind of behavior it was. So it was sin in God's eyes, not a crime. It used to be, and I believe adultery ought to be a sin again. The damage that's done by adultery, by breaking up families, it's devastating. It's huge. It ought to be a crime. once again. But anyway, they were sins. What Donald Trump committed were sins, and paying money to these women to cover it up was a sin, but not a crime. Now, this is a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. You have these all the time. I mean, a company fires somebody, they give them a generous severance, and oftentimes that generous severance is conditioned on them not bad-mouthing the organization when they leave. That's a non-disclosure agreement. There's nothing unethical or immoral about that at all. And that's what Donald Trump entered into. That's a kind of agreement, a non-disclosure agreement with these women. Now it's all come out, and they've started talking and all that. Don't forget, Congress has 268 examples of this right out there. 268 congressmen fooled around on their wives, and they have a big, giant slush fund. $17 million they paid out to try to keep these women quiet. It's the same kind of deal. So if they're going to go after Trump on that stuff, they ought to go after all 268 congressmen. And whatever they want to do to Trump, they ought to do the same thing to those congressmen. So here's Rudy Giuliani, and it's probably the Southern District of New York. Not going to be Mueller, but the Southern District of New York that's probably going to try to do something with these non-disclosure agreements to try to get Trump in trouble. Here is Rudy Giuliani talking about that, clip one.
I'm disgusted with the Southern District. Yeah, I'm going to tell you another thing. You see what we're talking about? It's not a crime. It's not a crime, George. Paying $130,000 to Stormy whatever and paying $150,000 to the other one is not a crime. The Edwards case determines that. She was paid $1.1 million to be a no-show in his campaign.
As you know, Mayor, the Edwards case is actually quite different. The judge in that case said that if this payment...
George, it's not the judge. It's the FEC. The FEC ruled on the Edwards case before they prosecuted it. The FEC ruled it's no violation of the campaign finance law. The Justice Department went ahead and prosecuted anyway, and they were embarrassed.
So Rudy Giuliani said, look, I'm disgusted with the Southern District of New York because this has already been settled by the FEC. That's the Federal Election Commission. John Edwards, you remember this. He did the same thing with a woman named Riley Hunter during his campaign in 2008. And he did the same thing with her, got money together, paid her off to keep silence. It didn't work then either, but that's what he did. And the FEC ruled that that is not a campaign contribution. It is not a campaign finance violation, completely independent of the campaign. And the reason may be to protect the candidate from embarrassment, but that does not make it a campaign contribution or a campaign contribution violation. And that's what really Giuliani is talking about here. This has already been settled by the FEC. This is the federal organization that oversees all financing of campaigns. And they said, look, this is not a campaign contribution. It is not a campaign violation. So that's been settled. And Rudy Giuliani says, I'm disgusted with those who are trying to pretend that this hasn't been settled. Now, John Edwards had the advantage of being a Democrat. So everybody in D.C., everybody in the Democratic Party, everybody in the media was perfectly willing to cooperate with him to the degree that they could to give him a pass on all of this. Now, Judge Napolitano, clip number 9, he's got a slightly different view of the matter. But remember what we just talked about, what Rudy Giuliani said, that this is not a crime, that the FEC has already ruled in John Edwards' case, before it was ever prosecuted, that it's not a violation of campaign finance law. That's very important to remember, that the FEC has already ruled on this. All right, let's listen to Judge Napolitano, clip 9.
The felony is paying Michael Cohen to commit a felony. It's pretty basic. Somebody hires you, A hires B to shoot someone. A is as liable as if he had pulled the trigger. You pay someone to commit a crime, they commit the crime, you are liable, criminally liable for their commission of that crime as well as their being liable. That's what the prosecutors told the federal judge.
That's what the prosecutors told the federal judge. The prosecutors aren't the ones that make the decisions. Judges make the decisions, and juries make the decisions. So what the prosecutor says, that's what happened. He's still got to prove that in court, and he may not convince the jury, he may not convince the judge. And again, as we saw, that's already been adjudicated by the Federal Election Commission. All right, let me see. Let's talk about this border wall instance for a moment. I'll come back to some of this. But let's start with clip number 4. And this is Stephen Miller. You know, there's been a lot of dust in the air over the 7-year-old girl from Guatemala dying in U.S. custody. And, of course, the media has jumped all over this thing because the girl was in U.S. custody when it happened. They are blaming Donald Trump. Donald Trump personally went down to that facility, saw that somebody was about to give her a drink of water, and swatted that cup of water right out of their hands so they could not provide hydration to this girl. That's what the left-wing media wants you to think. Now, the reality is the father of the migrant girl, the father himself, he has refuted claims, this is according to Daily Caller, has refuted claims that she hadn't had food or water in days prior to being taken into custody. He said, I gave her water, I gave her food, I gave her nutrition. And he signed to that effect, signed a document to that effect. No, the girl had not gone without water, had not gone without food. And he also said that he had absolutely no complaints about how he and his daughter were treated once they were apprehended. So he told his attorneys, and he told the Border Patrol folks that he made sure that they had food and water as they made the journey across Mexico from Guatemala. He signed a form when they took her into custody to put her on a bus, get her to a facility. He signed a form saying that she was not ill. Meaning, look, if he'd signed the thing and said she's ill, there was a process by which they could get medical care to her. He said, no, she's not ill. She's doing just fine. It was a 90-mile bus trip. By the end of that bus trip, she was vomiting. She was in deteriorating condition. She required medical attention. She was suffering from seizures. Her temperature was almost 106 degrees Fahrenheit. She required medical attention, but she later died at the hospital. They revived her twice, but she died. This is reading from the Daily Caller article. Multiple media outlets presented the story with misleading headlines suggesting that Border Patrol agents were somehow responsible for the child's death. But listen to this. Jake Tapper. Remember, I tell you, this guy occasionally veers into decent journalism. Did it again here. He noted in a series of tweets that the girl's father had no complaints. He says this in a tweet. Paniagua, that's the Guatemalan consul, says the father of Jacqueline has no complaints about how Border Patrol agents treated him and his daughter. Tweet number 2, the consul says the father told him that agents did everything they possibly could to help the girl on the bus. Tweet number 3, again from Jake Tapper, she did not show any signs of distress until about 5 a.m. when they were placed on the bus to ride from the border checkpoint. So Jake Tapper, the one coming to the aid of the Border Patrol on that one. Now let's take a quick look at clip number 4. This is Stephen Miller. And I'll tell you what I think they ought to do is I think the Trump administration ought to put this guy on speed dial. Get this guy to every network, every cable show, give him a speed dial number to get hold of him immediately on short notice and bring him in for an interview. This guy is absolutely terrific. You know, and you think about this for a second. Think about what happens to parents. Think about this for a second. In America, what happens to parents who leave their kids in a hot car? What happens to them? They go to prison, sometimes for years. We do not put up with this kind of negligent care for a child. So you have an American parent taking their child on a hike across Death Valley, and the child dies from dehydration. You think that parent is going to get off scot-free? That parent is going to be behind bars at some point. So again, you just see this complete double standard in the way we deal with these situations at the border. Now, anyway, here's Stephen Miller talking with Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation about the situation at the border.
Who bears responsibility for her death?
Our hearts break for the tragic death of the 7-year-old girl. The loss of that precious life is horrifying. It is a painful reminder of the ongoing humanitarian tragedy that is illegal immigration and the misery that it spreads. A coyote dropped off 163 migrants in an extremely remote section of New Mexico. Those individuals were found by Border Patrol, who in many cases act as first responders. In fact, Border Patrol saves about 4,000 lives every single year. Unfortunately, hundreds die on the dangerous trek up. Smuggling organizations profit off death and misery. They are vicious, vile organizations. And it's time that both parties had the appropriate level of outrage over the fact that these organizations continue to take advantage.
Equipped to deal with the record number of families coming across. Why aren't they?
One of the great tragedies that is going on in our country today is the loopholes in our immigration laws and the deficiencies in our immigration laws and left-wing activist judicial rulings that incentivize the most vulnerable populations to come to our country.
What I want you to listen and learn from Stephen Miller there is you notice that guy is always on the attack. That guy is always on offense in dealing with the talking snake media. He never retreats. He never defends, doesn't even answer a lot of their questions. He takes their question and he seizes it and he uses it to launch into the affirmation of the point that he wants to make, is always on offense. So that's a good lesson for people who deal with the media. Now let's drop down to clip number 13, because one of the issues that's going to be dealt with this week in D.C. is the issue of funding the border, and the Democrats have already made it clear that they are not going to participate in this whatsoever. Now, clip number 13, what you'll hear here is what the Democrats used to say about the border wall. Clip 13.
The Democrats are absolute hypocrites. All along, they've been supporting walls and supporting fences and supporting all sorts of border security.
Illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple.
I voted numerous times when I was a senator to spend money to build a barrier to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in.
We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked.
The fact is, they've always supported fences and walls and partitions, but you know what? They only don't want to do it because of me. They have to put the people ahead of politics. We need to have the wall. We need border security. Whatever it takes to get border security, I will do it. I pledged that a long time ago, and I will pledge it always. We've done a really fantastic job with what we have. We can do an almost perfect job if we have the wall and proper border security. And that's what we're going to do for the American people. Thank you.
And so Chuck Schumer out there today saying he's not going to get that wall in any way, shape, or form. Remember, the Democrats are the ones that are always talking about the need to be bipartisan, to find common ground. Excuse me. Find common ground, but absolutely unwilling to do it. Now let's grab clip number 5. This is John Barrasso, senator from Wyoming. So Chuck Schumer's on record. We're not going to have a wall for Donald Trump. No way, no how. He's going to have to shut the government down to do it. How do the Republicans in leadership feel about shutting down the government to put the pressure on the Democrats to come up with funding for the wall? Here's John Barrasso.
I still think it's better to not have any sort of even a partial shutdown, whether it's over Christmas or any time. I don't think people benefit by that.
I don't think people benefit from it. We don't want a shutdown ever. So notice here you've got Donald Trump saying, I want a measly $5 billion for this wall. I've told you before that's chump change in the federal budget. This chump change, something that falls out of the Senate pocket when they're walking out the door. It's chump change. There's $760 billion in the military budget. Let's grab $5 billion out of there. They'll never notice it missing. And let's put it into the wall. And let's get Donald Trump to use the military to build the wall. But it's people in his own party. He can't even get John Barrasso and other Republicans to get on board with the importance of a wall for our security.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
Medicaid costs American taxpayers more than Medicare. Federal dollars are transferred to states as federal matching funds, but the federal government is flying blind. In 2017, federal payments to Medicaid health plans were half of all Medicaid payments. In 2016, to add accountability, the federal government said states must collect and report patient data that shows the use of medical services so payments can be audited, but no parameters were given. Now the government's accountability office says the federal government should also set parameters for when matching funds will be disallowed. Considering how lucrative Medicaid has become for health plans and because of the vast expansion of Medicaid under Obamacare, this is a worthy recommendation.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly e-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
AFR programming is now available on Alexa.
Alexa, play American Family Radio.
Welcome to the AFR Alexa skill.
Alexa, play the Today's Issues podcast from August 10th.
Do you want to play hour 1 or 2?
Hour 1.
This is Trivia Friday.
Click Just Ask Alexa at the bottom of the Alexa FAQ page at afr.net to get started. Then use Amazon Alexa to access the programming of American Family Radio.
The loss of a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming. There is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program that's been around for 25 years, and they have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $1 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money. Think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have a lot to offer? Well, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more, and there's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. We're going to hit a couple of topics in this segment. I want to finish up on the wall here because I've got two sound bites I want to play. One is from Stephen Miller, the guy we've just been listening to, who's great, absolutely great. Ought to be on cable news, network news all the time. They need to give this guy more visibility. And then Sarah Sanders talking at a press briefing about what this reveals, what this whole circumstance reveals. Then we're going to talk about this First Step bill, which has got some major problems. And AFA has been standing virtually alone among conservative organizations to resist this thing in its current form. Now, clip number 14, this is Stephen Miller talking to Laura Ingraham about the wall. And first, he talks about how Donald Trump is positioned. But listen to the distinction he draws between Trump and the Democrats.
You see the old, shorter barrier that predated this administration. You see people climbing over it and throwing human beings over it. You need that 30-foot height. But I just want to say, I want to get to the real issue at hand. The Democrats are fighting for illegal aliens. Donald Trump is fighting for American citizens. That's what this whole thing's about. You've covered this better than probably anybody for years. You understand this is about sovereignty. It's about working men and women. It's about safe communities. It's about wages, living conditions, quality of life. This is the battle right now, right before our very eyes. We are going to win because Donald Trump is not backing down.
Donald Trump is not backing down, but that statement in there, Democrats are fighting for illegal aliens. Donald Trump is fighting for American citizens. That is exactly right, and that just clarifies that whole issue incident. Now, here's what Sarah Sanders said, and this likewise is very poignant and revealing. Clip 15.
Democrats have got to decide, Martha, if they love our country more than they hate this president. And so far, we've seen no indication that they're willing to do that.
All right, it's a good question. Do the Democrats love our country more than they hate Donald Trump? Their opposition to Donald Trump being driven by just about pure vitriol and hatred. All right, I want to turn our attention to a special guest that we have on the phone, Senator Angela Hill. She's a Mississippi State Senator. And one of the issues that's in process right now, I think there might have even been a procedural vote on this legislation today, is what's called the First Step Act. It's a prison reform act, a sentencing reform act that Donald Trump likes. A lot of conservative groups sign on to this. A lot of people that we like as conservative people have endorsed this thing publicly. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, is behind this thing, helped to shape it and craft it. Ivanka supports it. So there's a lot of kind of establishment support for this bill in Washington, D.C. But there are numerous problems with this bill as it is written, and some of these problems show up at the state level because many of the same reforms are being tried in different places. And Angela Hill is with us. Senator Hill, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thank you for having me today, Brian.
Well, Angela or Senator Hill, let's talk about some of the details of some of the problems with this First Step bill. It provides early release for certain offenders, and I think our problem looking at the bill is it still provides early release. They're claiming, no, we're not going to let any bad people out with this bill. Nobody that ought to be on the street is going to be able to get out on the street any earlier because of this bill. But I'm looking at some of the exceptions in the federal bill, and then I want you to talk a little bit about the way this thing works at the state level. Rape is part of a war crime. Though anybody does that, they'll still be eligible under this bill for early release. Bank robbery by force, eligible for early release. Drive-by shootings, eligible. Assaulting a law enforcement officer, eligible. Carjacking with intent to cause death, eligible. Assaulting a child or an infant, eligible. And I mean, the list goes on. So talk to us, Angela.
I don't consider those low-level crimes.
Say that again?
I mean, I do not consider those low-level offenses. I mean, carjacking is a violent offense.
Absolutely.
And these potential, sexual coercion crimes for minors. I mean, anybody knows that those people are dangerous. So that's the concerning thing to me.
And you can understand, I can understand Senator Hill, talking to Senator Angela Hill of the Mississippi State Senate, you can understand why you might want to make some reforms to provide early release for absolutely non-violent offenders who haven't touched anybody, haven't threatened anybody, haven't harmed anybody, but that's not the kind of people that are going to get early release on this bill.
Exactly. And a lot of these inmates have already pled down from the crime that they actually committed. And that's something that we see on a state level, unfortunately, because, we went through the prison reform in 2014 with House Bill 585, which gave a lot of discretion to the parole board and MDOC for early release of certain, quote, nonviolent people. But we've already seen that some of these people, who might have been convicted and on paper showed that it was a nonviolent offense, but they actually pled down to something lesser than they actually did. And you look at the case of Robert Jackson, who murdered the people in the convenience store in Philadelphia, Mississippi. His conviction showed robbery, which was eligible for early release. But what he actually committed was armed robbery. But he didn't get convicted on armed robbery. He got convicted on robbery. Therefore, he was eligible for early release. But we saw that he was violent, and he came out and actually committed murder while on early release and being supposedly electronically monitored, and was out of his area. And so I've already seen what can happen when you're told, oh, none of these people are going to fall through the cracks. Well, they absolutely are going to fall through the cracks. Either their record's not going to show what they actually did. Maybe they're even a habitual offender, but they've had a lot of charges dropped in the past. So you just cannot be too careful when it comes to public safety of law-abiding citizens. We cannot have a false sense of recidivism that these people are not committing violent crimes, but yet when they're out on parole and they're committing, even felonies, and they're not getting revoked in the state of Mississippi, to make the recidivism rate look like it's lower. You have the case with the Brookhaven police officers being shot. This guy was out on supervised parole as well, that killed these Brookhaven police officers. And I think he committed several felonies. Instead of being revoked, he was, 6 months, I think he served, and they sent him on a detainer to Adams County to face some charges over there, and then he, never did appear on the charges. And then, his parole could have been revoked, I think, until 2020. But he didn't get revoked until after he committed the murders of the officers. So, we've got some serious issues to look at.
Well, it's interesting, Senator Hill, you talk about these plea deals, because a very common tactic or technique that prosecutors will do to get a conviction and maybe to get somebody off the street, get them to plead to a lower charge in exchange for a shorter sentence or whatever, but that just plays right into the hands of some of the weaknesses in this bill.
It absolutely does. You have those deals made on the front end, and then when you look at, the sentencing and you look at the potential for early release, those two things are working against the public. I'm just telling you they are.
Now, we have looked at some amendments that have been offered by Senator Cotton from Arkansas and Senator Kennedy from Louisiana. I think Ted Cruz has offered some amendments. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at those. I haven't had a chance to look at them in detail, but my understanding is those amendments fix most of the problems with the bill as it currently exists. Can you comment on that?
Well, I think it could fix the problems with the crimes that are not excluded, to list those. And I think the victims having to be notified, that's a good thing. I was actually listening to Tom Cotton on Sandy Rios this morning and listen to what he had to say. But the thing you can't fix is the fact that some of these people are pleading down to lesser crimes. So you're still going to have some of these people that are very violent that have pled down to a lesser crime that are going to get early release under this bill. So, sometimes I don't know if some of this is fixable unless you actually go back and look at what they actually did and how they pled.
So
if they pled down to something less than what they actually committed.
Now we've encouraged our folks here in our network with a bill as it exists. We've encouraged them to oppose this bill, contact their senators, and register their problems with it. House members the same. But I'm hearing from you, Senator Hill, that you would recommend that they oppose this bill, even if they try some of these fixes that have been suggested by Senator Cotton.
I'm just saying that Robert Jackson is a prime example of that, who got out on early release from Mississippi Department of Corrections because he was not prosecuted for armed robbery, which is a violent crime, even though he committed armed robbery. He was prosecuted for robbery. So he got out on early release, and then he went and killed 2 people in a convenience store in Philadelphia. So, the public's going to have to decide, and it's something that's serious. I don't want, somebody with possession, a small amount of drugs or whatever. I don't have a problem with those people being released, but we have to look further back into these people's criminal history rather than just the conviction that's on their paper that they're serving time for. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a comprehensive look, and unfortunately, they're saying that, that the parole board or the federal prison board or whatever is going to look at these people and they're going to score how they behave and all that. Well, a lot of people are going to behave well to get out of jail. Sure. And then once they get out of jail, they're going to maybe go back to their own ways. So it's got to be more than what happens while they're incarcerated. You got to look back at what they've done in the past and whether they're, pled down, whether they're, constantly a revolving door in trouble, and whether you're doing some real type of meaningful reforms to try to help these people integrate into society rather than just having them sit in a technical violation center and do word search programs or whatever that they're doing in the technical violation centers.
Our guest has been State Senator Angela Hill from my adopted state of Mississippi. Thank you, Senator Hill. Appreciate so much the work you do for the people of Mississippi. Thank you for taking time to chat with us, and God bless you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on that first step bill. A lot of enthusiasm in D.C., a lot of establishment types are singing its praises, and AFA. Rob, could you jump behind this mic here just for a second? a lot of people singing its praises, and AFA, your American Family Association, has been about the only conservative organization to come out strongly in opposition to the bill in its original form.
Yes, we have, Brian, and thank you for listening and dialing into Brian's show here. Yeah, Rob Chambers with AFA Action, Vice President, and one thing that we've been monitoring about this bill is that it does have significant problems with it in its current form, and the earlier in the show you mentioned about carjacking, Brian. Senator Hill mentioned it as well. And in the original bill, it says that the people who are not eligible for early release are carjackers who committed murder. Okay, so that means any other person that's in prison that is in prison for carjacking could be considered for early release.
So as long as they didn't commit murder.
Right. So evidently, the senators, Chuck Grassley and company, and co-sponsors of this bill, think that carjacking is a low-level nonviolent behavior. But for example, so Tom Cotton and the Cotton-Kennedy Amendment would address that. Basically, it would say if you are guilty and been sentenced for carjacking, period, you don't qualify for early release.
So would you suggest that we call our senators and encourage them to adopt the Kennedy?
The Cotton-Kennedy amendments. I encourage you to go to afa.net or afaaction.net, and the action alert is there. And contact your senator and urge them to support the Cotton-Kennedy amendments. There's 3 of them.
All right, because this is important, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is bad actors being let back out on the street way before they ought to be in the general population. All right, Rob, thank you so much for sitting in, and Rob's the one that helped make the connection with Senator Hill. So that's something to keep an eye on. It's one of those things that kind of sneaks up on you because we're heading into Christmas and people are distracted by other things, and so something like this can slip right through the cracks. Now, this is just kind of a palate cleanser as we get to the end of the program. Grab clip number 2. This is a senator from Hawaii by the name of Ted Lieu, and Senator Lieu seems to be stuck, or maybe he's a representative. He seems to be stuck on a particular favorite word. Let's see if you can pick out what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me start by saying this is a stupid and ridiculous hearing. It was one of the most bizarre and stupid, ridiculous hearings I've ever attended. It is an inefficient and stupid system. We have the power to stop stupid legislation. It really is quite a stupid thing. That's just dumb. So again, this was a stupid hearing. They can pass whatever stupid legislation they want, but it's really stupid to use military force without a strategy. The reason they didn't meet with the president was because of his stupid tweet for what is really a stupid interview. Actually, Ari, I think the real reason the Republicans are launching these stupid investigations is like dangling this shiny object, saying, here, look at it.
So Senator Lieu, or Representative Lieu, showing a little bit of creativity and innovation, dropped the word dumb in there on occasion just for variety. Now, very quickly, clip number 3, Joy Reid, and listen to how explicitly racist the Democratic Party is prepared to be in picking a nominee for 2020.
What's the most important constituency for Democrats in 2020? Black women. And I've heard plenty of black women say, if there's not a black woman on this ticket, I'm not voting, I'm not excited, I'm not enthusiastic. If the Democratic Party wants to run seriously in 2020, they can't relegate black women to second class. They can't relegate black women to a consolation prize.
Yeah, and by the way, E.J. Dionne, they can't run 2 white guys. I mean, the idea that you have Joe Biden talking to Beto O'Rourke and saying maybe they could be a ticket, I personally find it hard to understand how you get the requisite turnout among voters of color if it's a 2 white male ticket. I mean, women are going to be outraged if there's not a woman on the ticket, and voters of color are going to say, well, then why are we participating?
So as soon as you play identity politics like the Democrats do, those are the kind of jams you get yourself into, and all of a sudden you're out there saying something blatantly racist. We can't run 2 white candidates. That's it for today. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap. Never forget, buy my book, and we're fighting a winnable war.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Announcing 3 new episodes of Ryan DeFrades' Secret Agent. These animated half-hour episodes will entertain children.
That's right!
Ryan DeFrades is a secret agent with a whole lot to learn, and he